Today's show is on the real beauty of the dark arts of blood and gore. I'm so excited to introduce Daniella Sanfilippo, a very cool makeup artist that I've had the pleasure of working with on a couple of films. How the heck are you?
I'm good. How are you, Tami? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this mysterious world of horror. So I was kind of curious about, we've worked on a horror film and then one on racial violence, which is very makeup driven.
Yes.
And I was just curious, how do you approach these projects and work with the director?
Definitely talk about the scene. So I always have to read the script first, regardless whether it's beauty or blood work. I definitely read the script. I make my notes. I see what needs to be done visually. And then I talk to the director about it. And I'm like, okay, how bloody are we going with this? And how real are we going with this? Like, do we want to look real, or do we want it to look like gore? Because there, are some films that are just, I just want blood everywhere. And then there are some films that are like, wow, that looks real. Like, that looks like an injury. And so in makeup school, we learned the full anatomy of the body. And so we learned bone structure. We learned all the placements. So using that, I always ask the director, what do you want? And then obviously blood test runs are the best way to go. You want to practice, especially with the Horror with Roberts film. We definitely did a lot of blood runs on Sundays. Yeah, pretty much, I think almost a month of blood runs. So 4 Sundays prior to shooting, he was over every Sunday and we were just going at it. Or blood, there's so many different levels. So there's color. How fresh is the blood? Are we going with a more red blood that looks more fresh? Or are we going with a darker blood? How long has the injury been there? And then are we going with wet blood, or are we going with dried blood? How old is the injury? So I always like to read the script and analyze, okay, if it's a fight scene like we did with Harriet, that was fresh. That was in the moment. So that was going to need, more red than dark, like more bright red. And it was definitely going to be more wet than dry. And then placement. So I always, try to figure out, okay, if they're fighting, are they getting hit in the right eye, the left eye? Are they getting punched in the nose? Is the nose breaking? And then that will affect where the blood's going to go. And how is their position? Are they on the ground? Are they standing up? How will the blood drip down the face? Yes, very.
That's a lot to think about. And a lot of it I didn't think about. You're right. I mean, how old is it? Is it hard on their face? Is it soft, just running down? That's really insightful.
Yes. So when you think, visual, makeup is very visual. So I always look for the visual side of things when I'm reading the script. So I'm not just reading the scenes, I'm visualizing the scenes. And I'm like, okay, how is this going to look visually? And how does the director want this to look visually? So I can bring the director's vision to life.
Now, do you have to find images that represent what you think you're going to go for? Or do they provide you with images like, hey, I liked in Fight Club this look, or, references?
I always ask them for their references. And then I will show them mine. If they don't have anything, I will show them, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Is this what you're visualizing? But 9 times out of 10, they already have their storyboard and they already have their visual and they show it to me. And I'm like, okay, this is what you want. And I always ask. There was this one time the guy was on drugs. And so he needed to look very strung out. And I was like, okay, do you want this to look realistically strung out, or do you want this to look almost like zombified? Because the pictures he was giving me was unrealistic. It was too exaggerated to what he was telling me. And so he was like, no, I want it to look real. And I was like, okay. So the day of set, I'm making him look strung out. And I was like, okay, this is definitely a little bit lighter than the pictures he sent me, but this is what looks real. So I asked the director, hey, can you take the actor in front of the camera and tell me what you think? And he was like, I love it, but he's like, I want more. I'm like, okay. So I go in, I do more, already knowing what's going to happen. I'm going to have to go back to that look. But I tried to give my input. I tried.
Right.
So I go more. He comes back. He goes, I love it. And I'm like, oh, great. Bring him in front of the camera. He comes back. It's too much. I knew it. But he had to visually see it first because he was not understanding it. What he was wanting and what he was visualizing was not adding up. And so I knew that, but I was like, you have to visually see it. That's fine. It's, it's a quick fix, so it's not too bad. Yeah, as the makeup artist, you can give your best recommendation to the director, but ultimately it's up to them. So there are some times when I had a bullet wound, which I know nowadays we more do digitally with the bullet wounds, but when I was making it, he wanted it over exaggerated. So I was like, okay, because a normal bullet wound, is like this big, and he wanted it like this big. And I was like, okay, if that's what you want.
Right. What gun are you using?
Yeah, exactly. So there's always comes into play. I love realism. I love when, especially with blood, I want it to look real. I want you to be like, oh my God, is it what happened to you? I don't want it to be like, oh, that looks like makeup. Oh, that's just fun blood. I love the realism, but it's ultimately, what does the director want?
Yeah, yeah. What are some tips that you could give to directors, in working with a makeup artist, especially when it comes to blood and gore, that sometime, through your experiences that you've come across where it's like, okay, to all you new directors out there or directors, here's some tips in working with a makeup artist?
Yes, definitely making sure you have extra wardrobe of whatever you're doing. So, because, blood sometimes, if it gets on the clothes and then you got to redo the scene, you want to make sure you have extras of the clothes. And I always say, save the blood for last, because even if you wanted to go in chronological order, it's messy. You got to clean it up. You have to allow time for that. So just making sure that is the last thing to be done. That way you can clean it up and you don't have to worry about moving on to the next thing. Or especially when it comes to, even if there are more scenes after the blood, making sure that the cleanup also, we're on the body, because that also takes some time. And depending on how much blood we're doing, is it a big blood splatter? Is it just a little cut? Things like that always go into play with timing. So I always try to say, save the blood for last.
Now, what happens in bruising, a fight scene?
Yes.
Or maybe more so in the horror film, over time he got worse and worse and worse. Do you think it's better to do the worst first and then take off the makeup, or better to keep adding to the makeup? Is there, or it really doesn't matter?
I mean, I personally would say it's definitely easier to go with starting with the fresh bruise, because that's going to be more red, and then going into the darker bruising.
Yeah.
Just because for time, it's easier to add and faster to add darkness than it is to take off. So even though it would make sense, go dark and then just take it off, timing wise for filming, it's actually easier to start with the fresh, start minimal, and then build your way up.
And then, yeah, and how do you keep the consistency? I know sometimes scenes have to go to the next day. Yes. Are you taking pictures? What do you do to prepare for each day?
I definitely take pictures and placement. So I always, when I'm doing it, I always kind of analyze their face. And I always pick a spot that I'll like remember that is like very distinct. So if there is like a cut, by the eye, okay, am I going to start like right here? Or am I going to start like the brow or like the end of the eye? Or like the opening of the ear. I always find a spot on the face that I can start and end, and I know that like, okay, that's where it's going to be. And definitely taking pictures without a doubt. And with bruising, I always follow the bone structure. So I know where, like on the forehead, I know where if I place like bruising more right here and less right here, it's going to make it look like it's bumped, as opposed to like just putting like blackness, like darkness right here. So you always follow the shape of the face as well, or the arm, wherever you're placing it, and then just taking pictures of that.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you make blood? I mean, and also, how much blood do you bring? I mean, that must be kind of nerve-wracking that you're like, okay, how much blood are they going to use? Is it going to work? I was on another shoot where they were pumping blood through a tube that went through the car and then to him because he was on the other side of the car, and they needed to drag him, and they wanted the blood to be dragging with him. And then the pump didn't work. So I'm sure all these things happen. So, but you have to have enough blood, because if there was a hole, so it was leaking. So how do you prep for that? How do you make sure, one, I have enough and the consistency, and are you making it beforehand and bringing it? And then how do you keep it fresh? Let's talk about blood.
Okay, let's talk about blood. So it all depends on the scene. If it's just injuries, you don't need to bring a lot of blood. Injuries, I usually just have a pre-made bottle that I buy from Nigel's, because they just have like a bunch of variety of like different color bloods. And then I always keep a black food dye coloring and a red food dye coloring in my kit. So if I need to make something more red, I have the red there. And if I need to make something a little bit darker, then I have the black there to make it darker. So I always have my liquid pre-made, usually about a medium shade blood, not super bright, not super dark. So that way I can go either way, unless I know the script and I'm buying specifically for the script. Then if I know everything is fresh blood, I'm going with a bright red. If everything is aged blood, I'm going with a dark red. Or also just director's preference. Some directors prefer brighter red, some prefer darker red, even if it is fresh. And then, they work it out in coloring. So it's whatever their preference is, I make sure I have that liquid bottle. And then I also have, it's called scab blood, which is like a blood jelly. And so I have a jar of blood jelly, and that's the dried blood. And that's what I use for a lot of my injuries when it comes to like cuts, scrapes, anything like mouth cuts, anything like that. I have my blood jelly. And then if I need it to drip, I add a little bit of the liquid blood to it. If I need mouth blood, I like to make it. And if I know that they're asking for a scene that requires like a lot of blood everywhere, and they're
like
not
Robert's film.
Yes. Then I'm going to make it, because to buy a gallon of blood is ridiculous when you can make a big quantity of it, depending on where you're going, because you also have to commute the blood. So, when you buy pre-made blood, it's nice and sealed, so you're good to go wherever you're traveling to, wherever the distance. When you're making the blood, you have to make sure you have a container and a seal that's going to seal that, because it's going to be hard to transport. So if I'm making blood for mouth blood, I love using syrup and food dye. Like syrup and food dye is like my consistency. If I need to water it down a little bit, I will. But it's got like syrup's just got that nice slow drip. It tastes good. Oh, I mix it with chocolate syrup as well. So chocolate syrup and regular syrup with red food coloring. That's my go-to because it tastes yummy and it looks great and it gives the drip that it needs. That's for mouth though. It is a little bit sticky, so I don't like to use it everywhere. You can use cornstarch and food dye mixed with some water, and that will give you a nice blood as well, and it's not sticky. And there's no bad chemicals in it, so it's also easy for disposal. So with Robert's set, we had a little bit of one of our other special effects guys, he wanted to use this ISO gel-like thing to make it slimy. And because of the chemical in that, we couldn't just dispose of it anywhere. Because if you dispose of it like at a park and a dog walked by and like licked the grass, you know, it could cause problems. So that was something that was very, very interesting. And the disposal of that blood, we could make a movie out of that. They had to go to the desert.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. Even like the bio waste company, I think, was just like, we don't want it, or like, it's not enough for you. Like, it's not worth you giving this to us. So we ended up having to go to the desert. I don't want to give away any big details on that one. And that one we used cocoa powder, which also isn't safe for dogs either. Cocoa powder is great instead of cornstarch if you are making more of a darker blood. Oil and vinegar and syrup and food dye.
Wow. Yeah. So how long does blood last? I mean, if you're buying it from somebody, does it expire at a certain time? Do you have to use it in a week, or what does that look like?
You have like a year.
Wow.
You have
that's
like
great.
6 months to a year, depending on what brand you're buying. You have like 6 months to a year.
Okay, so is it weird that if we went into your apartment, we would see all these bottles of blood? And do you have this whole rack?
The trunk of my car, I would hope I don't get pulled over because the trunk of my car, I still have like I have a gallon of fake blood in there, but there's not much blood in it anymore. But the bottle is very bloody, and the bag that it's in is very bloody. I also have like a stone mold of my face in there. So they probably think that, like, I don't know, I have some kind of like body parts or something.
Yeah.
My apartment
next to the shovel.
has a bloody mannequin head. I had to create a crime scene in my kitchen, and I needed like a fake head, like a head chopped off, because it was a horror. So it was like this creature that came in and killed this woman, and the police are investigating, and they're looking for a human. They think like a human did this, but it was actually some like alien creature. And so the head was like decapitated. So I have my mannequin head from school. I have that. She's all bloody, and I kept her bloody because I was like, oh, she looks cool like that. So if someone were to walk into my closet, they'd probably scream. She was in my bathroom for the longest time. And then I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I should move you. My friends come over, they're like, that's weird.
Yeah. Or you
like
hear
used
screams.
To it. Yeah, they're like used to it. I have some fake blood on my chucks that I wear to set, and I keep it there just because I'm like, these are like my special effects like chucks. So I like wearing them on set, and there's fake blood on that. But if anybody were to see me in real life with these chucks, they'd be like, she had blood on her shoes? Like, what is she doing? What did she do? There was this one time I was out at a restaurant, and we were talking about the blood scene, and it was a murder scene. And the waitress came over, and she was like, do I need to be concerned? And I was like, no, I promise you we're not planning a real murder. Like, this is all for a movie set. But she was like very concerned.
Courageous to even talk to you about it. It's like,
I know.
Yeah, it's for a movie set.
Yeah. I thought she would have just, called the cops. We just would have had the cops there. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah. And then you go into my car, and you see all this like blood. You're like, but thank God, I have a gallon it says fake blood on it. So, I hope the cops would believe that, it is fake blood, and they can sniff it, and, it's very much fake.
Yeah. Taste it.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you, like, when you use half of it, do you put them into the other containers, or no, you should never mix it like afterwards?
Sometimes I absolutely mix my blood. If I bought a blood,
Sounds
if
so
I
weird.
bought one that was too red and then I bought one that was like dark, I would mix the two, absolutely. Or even for consistency, because sometimes when you're buying the blood, you have to be careful because sometimes the fake blood, I don't like the way it drips. It won't give like a nice smooth drip. It almost
It's like
kind of
thick?
it trickles up. It beats up. It beats up
Okay.
into like little like just like like dots.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I don't want just like a line of dots. I want like a line.
Right.
So sometimes I will smooth it out with mixing another blood. I also carry syrup with me too, just in case. Because syrup or even Dawn dish soap, that's also a nice smooth consistency. Just make sure it doesn't bubble up. Make sure it doesn't set up. But the blue one, specifically the blue, for a nice red color, I'll mix some of that into my blood mix, absolutely, on set. And then once I mix all my bloods, I'll put that in its own little container because I know that that's what I used as my mixture. So I don't mix it in with my other bloods that are specifically, I know their ingredients and I know like their body, I don't want to mess up their color. So I'll have like everything is labeled. So I'll have my red blood, my dark blood. And then if I, like with Roberts, I did have some left over and I just have that, as my labeled as like my creation blood in its own container, safe and sound. So yes, I label them and I make sure I have containers that are sealed. And I take my blood out of my kit right away if it's my own container that I'm using. Like if I have my leftovers, I'm putting it in a bottle. I take it out of my kit right away because I don't want it to leak.
Where do you store everything?
In my closet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have like a container that you put it in and seal it? Or...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then my closet, it's like a nice, dry, cool area away from the sun. So that's where I store it. And then my blood jelly, it stays in my kit. And then some of my other bottles, like if I haven't opened them yet and they're perfectly sealed, they stay in their own little case. So I have like the Zuka cases. They're like bags that are like rectangular. And I just have my own bag specifically for blood. And I keep that all in there. So that way, if anything were to leak out, it's all just leaking out onto blood and not onto the rest of my things.
Right. Well, then let's talk about your kit. What do you bring to set?
I bring everything. I always bring my special effects and my beauty kit to set, even if the set requires no blood. I always bring it because you just never know.
Never know.
You never know. And also like my bruise wheel, it's great for not just bruises, but also dark circles. So I just always bring everything. Some of the things I'll leave behind will be like prosthetic like pieces. So if I know I'm not on a horror and I don't need like pre-made cuts and wounds or like gelatin or things like that, I will leave the big stuff behind. But I always bring at least one bag of special effects, which has like my scarring, my bruise wheel, and I always bring a little bit of blood.
Wow. And
liquid latex and spirit gum.
Why spirit gum?
Spirit gum is like glue.
Oh.
So if I need to glue down anything like a pre-laced beard or anything, because I was on a set that required robots, and so I had to glue down their mustaches and wigs on them. And so that, even though majority of the set is beauty, I still needed to glue down the mustache for a scene. So I brought my spirit gum and like remover for that, just in case.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
How often are you having to replenish your kit? I mean, do you go every week or after every shoot, or do you have enough to last you a couple shoots?
For blood, I have enough to last me a couple shoots depending on the blood work. So with Robert's shoot, everything that we bought for that tank of blood, that was all there. So it didn't affect my kit because we bought it for that. And then whatever, was used was used. So nothing came back to my kit from that, but nothing left my kit with the tank of blood. Now for like the dried blood, for like the bandages and things like that, I definitely use stuff from my kit, but it wasn't like it was a whole bottle. I would say my blood lasts me probably like 2 to 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Depending most of the time. It all depends on the film. If the film is requiring a lot of blood work, there's usually a kit fee, and I'm usually going out to buy the blood for that. And then sometimes I'll have blood left over from that, or sometimes all of that is used. And then because it was bought for that, it didn't come from my kit, so it was not touched. So the only time that's really coming from my kit is when it's like injuries, when it's like cuts, fight scenes. I have a fight scene coming up, so that'll be coming out of my kit. It's not like I'm going to go buy blood for it, because I still have some blood in my kit. And then also on Black Friday, Nigel's has a really good deal, so I try to stock up on my blood on that day.
What about makeup? I mean, are you having to, like, how often are you going to Nigel's?
Going a lot. Definitely for like disposable, like lip wands, mascara wands, makeup wipes. That stuff I have to replenish almost all the time after like every set. You go through so many of that. So I'm always having to replace my disposables. As far as my foundations, I replace them once a year. My powders, I mean, my eyeshadows, that can last you a couple of years. So you don't have to really replace your eyeshadows too often, which is great. But you definitely, mascara, you want to replace every 6 months. I definitely go through mascara a lot as well. And fake lashes. I definitely buy a lot of fake lashes. It's funny because I don't wear fake lashes, but I love putting them on people. There's something that's so therapeutic for me to put it on somebody else, but not so myself. It's so weird. But I'm constantly having to go and replace my disposables and my brushes and my lip wands all the time. And then if there is a scene or a film that requires some type of, like I had to do like a sewn mouth shut. So I had to go buy things to make that. And then that would just be incorporated in a kit fee. But yeah, so, or like fake tattoos. It all depends on the film. I always make sure that my kit is replenished before I go to set. And so if there's anything that I need that is different than my typical kit, that's when I'll ask for the kit fee. So if it's requiring some kind of tattoos or something that I don't carry tattoos in my kit, I'll require a kit fee and I'll go buy it. Things like that. But yeah.
Now, what about, okay, so the actors have all this bruising or makeup on, and in particular bruising and blood. Is that your requirement to have to take it all off, or do they go home and take it off? Like, how does that work?
Well, we were taught in school to take it off. We always offer, like, hey, you want me to take it off? 9 times out of 10, they want you to take it off, but there are those rare moments where they don't want you to take it off. They're like, oh, I'm going to like go scare somebody at home. Like, this is so cool. And I'm like, okay, cool. With beauty makeup, it's like hit or miss. Sometimes they want to keep it on. They're like, oh, I'm going out after. Like, I love what you did. So like, I'm going to keep it on. And so like a lot of the guys are like, yes, please take it off. And then some guys are like, it's fine. I could just wash it off with soap and water, right?
Yeah.
As long as I could do that, okay, cool. I'm just going to go shower. So it just all depends. But we definitely are taught to remove it, especially if it's prosthetic work. Like if they have like prosthetic pieces on, like any foam latex pieces, you definitely like when we were doing zombies in North Carolina last year, we definitely made sure that there was time to take off all of that makeup after the scenes were shot within the 12-hour day.
Now, can you reuse that or no? Once you take off that, you can't put it back on the next.
You can
Oh, you
reuse it.
can.
You absolutely can. Yeah, not multiple times. And it's got to be for that same actor. You don't want to put that foam latex piece onto somebody else because that actor, was in that piece for, hours in the day, and you don't know what was going on under there. And plus it was touching their skin.
Right.
And so even if you were to alcohol it and everything, it's still, you also customized it to their face shape. And their bone structure. So even if you were using just like a regular standard piece and it wasn't customized to their face, when you're gluing it onto their face and, the edges and everything, you're gluing it on to customize their bone structure. So it might not fit another person's face as well as you made it fit that face. And that you can use, like, I would say 2, maybe 3 times. If you really need to stretch it out, you might be able to do 4 times. I would say you have a good 2 times with it, and then it's time to get a new piece.
Okay. And that you get at Nigel's too? Is all that stuff, or do you have to go to a different store for that?
You can go to Nigel's for the foam latex, or you can go to a makeup lab.
Okay. And how do you find those out?
it's-
Like if somebody's starting in makeup, how do they find all these places? Is it just a Google search or?
Yeah, you could definitely do Google search. It all depends on the budget too. So if they're like, we need like the prosthetics, and I'm like, okay, well, if you want customized prosthetics, you're going to want a makeup lab. And they're like, we don't have the budget for that. And I'm like, okay. So alternative is to go to Nigel's or go online and find a prosthetic piece that's already done. Unless you know a makeup artist. Like I know a makeup artist that she does it at home. She has like the molds at home and stuff. And so she actually she made some and then brought some to our set in North Carolina.
Wow.
So that was pretty awesome. Yeah, that she like made some. But that requires a lot of time. And so I just always, if it's me and they don't want to hire somebody else or have budget to go to somebody else, then I'm like, okay, we're going pre-made and we're going to Nigel's.
I love that.
So like, these are the pieces we're picking. What do you want? And then I will paint them to whatever color they want. I'm like, yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how do you keep up to date on how to do bruises? I mean, are you watching movies? Like, what do you do for your research? Is there conferences you get to go to for makeup artistry and demonstrating this is how you do this effect? Like, how do you keep knowledgeable?
Well, I did learn the placement of bruises in school. And then after that, anytime there's bruising, I just research. So I look up Google pictures and I'm like, okay, I need, like a 3-week-old bruise, or I need like a 2-day-old bruise, or I need, a bruise. Plus also, I look at myself, like I bruise easily. So whenever I get a bruise or whenever I see my friend's bruise, like I just like mental picture. Sometimes I'll take like a real picture of it and then I have like real reference. I'm like, okay, like this is a real bruise, and like I will age it. So if I get like a fresh bruise, I take a picture of it. I take a picture of it every day until it fades away. And then I'm like, okay, this is the realistic timeline of how a bruise is. And so like a bruise gets yellow more like at the end than it does in the beginning. So in the beginning, it starts off like more red and then it goes deep purple. And so like the initial bruise is very like small, like it's not really there. It might be like, it may cover a big area, but you just see the outline of it. And then the next day you're like, holy wow, like there's the bruise. And then it'll be like that for a good like couple days.
Yeah.
And then after that, it starts to get smaller.
Yeah.
And it starts to get lighter. And that's where the yellow comes in.
Yeah. I totally forgot that it gets yellow. That's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I look it up if I need to, but I also just go off like my real life bruises that I have pictures of. But I always look it up. I'm like, okay, black eyes, I don't even need to look up anymore. I'm like, okay, what kind of black eye are we doing? I already know. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I just need to know how long has the black eye been there? Is this a fresh black eye or is this an aged black eye?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So are there challenges that you face when working in horror, and creating a convincing and terrifying look?
There are challenges, especially when you need to use like a pump or anything when it comes to like spraying the blood, like getting that blood splatter. That's usually like a one take, it's your do or die moment because especially if it's splattering everywhere, this is like your one time be all moment. And so you don't want to miss. And so it's always very nerve wracking because you're like, is it going to work? I always try to like avoid the pumps, anything like technical, because every time I use something technical, it just like malfunctions on me.
Right.
That's why I love makeup. It's usually doesn't involve anything digital.
Right.
It's usually like liquids and powders and creating colors and concoctions. But then like airbrush, I love using an airbrush machine. I love airbrush makeup. I love airbrushing tattoos. But if the airbrush fails on me, I don't know how to fix it. And then I'm screwed on set.
Right.
I don't have an IT guy with me to fix it. And I'm trying to fix it. I'm like, now I'm just wasting time. I'm like, I'm going to have to do this by hand anyway. So I always try to avoid those if I can. If it absolutely needs it, then okay. But like I'll even be like, even when you're using a spray, like they have like the bug spray gallon hoses. And even when you're using that to spray blood everywhere, you have to water it down so much it looks like Gatorade. And so it's just, you don't get the like nice, like thick blood drip spray.
Yeah.
Because it won't fit through the tube.
Right.
I always like to splatter using a brush, and I like to get all hands on deck and just have everybody just kind of splatter all at once. And just, that's where you get the most, like, I think, like, real and also just reliable
Yes.
splatter, because it's actually going to work. So we always like cheat with the camera. So I always talk to the director. I'm like, okay, we have a splatter scene. How are we doing this? Like, how are we going to cut the take so that way we can add the splatter in without messing up anything? And yeah, usually you have like a one take with the splatter. You're lucky if you get a second take.
Wow. Yeah, because you'd have to clean it all up too. And then...
Because then you have to clean it all up.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So if it's just like a minor like face splatter, that's easy. Like if you're getting splatter on somebody's face or like splatter in like a small area, that's easy to clean up and reset. And it's also like time savvy, like it's fast. But if you need like the whole thing, that's your one and done. That's your one and done.
It leads me to another question about blood. If there is like blood all over the floor, is it your job to clean that up? Who cleans up all the blood?
It's my responsibility. I have to make sure I'm always asked, does this stain? And there's always a risk of blood stain. Every single blood you buy will say like, it will never say like non-stainable.
Right.
Because you just never, red is such a
vibrant color.
Such a vibrant color, yes. And the dye that like, it's the most prominent. It's the one that stays the longest. So it's the most staining out of all the colors. Yeah. And so it like, is it machine washable? I always say buy extra clothes just in case. Wear something that you might not want, that you're not going to care if it does stain. But 9 times out of 10, all of my blood, there was a shirt that I wanted to keep bloody from Robert's set, and it washed right out. And it was because it was my pre-made blood. If it's my blood that I make, I know that's washing out. And so I'll always make sure, like, if we got to do like a whole big area, I'll make the blood for the big area. Because one, it's more cost efficient anyway. And two, I know it'll come out. If it's just like blood dripping from the wrist or like blood dripping from the face onto the ground, I always test the blood that I buy at home on my sink counter on the floor, and I make sure it comes out. And if it comes out, I'm like, okay, guys, we're good. It's not going to stain. But I always tell them we need to clean it up right away, because if it stays there, the longer it stays, the more chance you have of it staining.
Right.
So I always say we need to clean up right away with it. And if there was like any like hard surfaces, very easy to come out of. But if it's like carpet or, carpet, I'm like, you're going to want to make sure you have like a disposable rug, or a rug that like a carpet that you have like you buy an extra of, and the one you're okay with it getting bloody, because I don't think it might not come out. And just in case it doesn't come out, you're safe and you have an extra one. And out of clothes, I mean, majority of my clothes, all of the blood has come out, but there's always that risk that it might not. And so they always ask, is it going to come out? And I can't guarantee that it will come out. I can tell you from my own experience that this blood that I've used, previously has come out of the clothes that I worn that day. But I can't say 100%. You never want to say 100%, because then you're held liable for it.
Yeah.
So depending on, usually art department usually helps me out, and they're cleaning up the blood, like they're on it. I always try to be on it as well at cleaning up the blood myself, because I know that's the mess that I made. And also, like, that's my responsibility. If it does stain, that comes back on me.
Yeah, especially with carpet, because do you recommend that somebody, well, one, you said put a rug, because that's easy enough to take up. But if they have carpet, do you suggest that they do another carpet piece of the carpet to put on there to mock?
Yes.
Yeah, because...
Or just don't use that spot.
Yeah, move it.
I try to avoid, if there's like actual carpet ground, I'm like, please no. Like, we cannot do, but unless you don't mind it staining.
Yeah.
Because carpet, that's going to be really hard. You definitely want to put something over top of that.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. But I know, like, for Harriet, we had to do it on the street, and it did not stain the street. Like, that's fine. Hardwood floors, tiles, sinks, you're usually good at getting it. It comes right off. Ceramic flooring, it comes right off. But carpet is it's the one that's going to stain. So if you have carpet, I always say, no, you're going to want to buy a rug to put over that carpet. Just something, because it's going to stain. Or like, what can we put underneath the view? That looks okay. That it won't stain the actual carpet.
Yeah. Wow. This is like a lot of good advice and some intel on bloody, gory scenes and stuff. Do you have any last words or anything you want to share to the listeners as we close?
With blood, you have fun. There's like, if you make a mistake, it could be a happy mistake. That's what I love about blood. There are some technicalities to it with like placement and bone structure and anatomy. Once you understand that, the placement is very easy. And always just reference your photos, and always talk to your director and have a blood run. And when you do have to use a pump and you do have to use machines, definitely have blood runs. Make sure it's working ahead of time. Because if it doesn't, well, you have like that one chance. You have that one chance to make it work. So always test ahead of time. Even if they don't want to test it themselves, you on your own test it. I always like to test my work. I always like to test my bruising, just placements. And then I always, even with pictures, I'm just like, okay, from these pictures, this is what I created. Is this what you were looking for? I just love testing no matter what. So even if this set doesn't require you to test with them, still test on yourself or test on a friend. A lot of people love getting blood on them. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then take pictures and post it to, and look what happened to me.
Exactly. I did that once. I beat myself up, with makeup. And I sent a Snapchat to everybody back at home on the East Coast. And I said, oh, guys, I'm going to the hospital. I got into a fight. Like, I can't believe this happened. And everyone was like, what? And there was only like 2 people that were like, I know it's makeup. I know you were just practicing right now. And then I was like sitting outside and I was drinking an iced tea. And my neighbor comes up and he was like, oh my God, what happened? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, your face, like, did your roommate beat you up? And I was like, oh my God, no, it's makeup. I was just practicing. And he was like, oh, okay, I thought I was going to have to beat someone up for you. And I like totally forgot. Yeah, so that was funny.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tami. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram at Tami Magaro. Until we meet again, what's your story?